And I'm not very religious, but I prayed for this one.
I had this like existential crisis when I was a kid, and tried to figure out what's it all about. And none of the books I read seemed to actually have a good answer. You know, so I read all the religious texts, and I read a bunch of philosophy books, and they're all quite depressing. We don't really know what the meaning of life is. Trying to figure out the meaning of life, or like what does it all mean? Because it sort of seeming quite meaningless.
Do you have a spiritual life?
Well, it sort of depends on what spiritual means. I was trying to figure out what's the meaning of life, and there didn't seem to be any good answer.
But do you believe in like a god or like a higher power?
Well, something created the universe. Like, how do molecules have consciousness and feelings? So where along that path from a bunch of hydrogen molecules to humans, where did consciousness start? Why does this illusion exist?
Do you believe in God?
I believe there's some explanation for this universe, which you might call God.
So when you say, do you believe in God, which God? Is it Zeus? Is it Poseidon? Is it the Jewish God? Is it the Christian God?
Well, I think the currently the thing to do is to expand humanity and consciousness to the point where we're able to answer that question. I don't think we can answer that question yet, or we can't answer what's the meaning of life well yet.
The problem with consciousness is self-evident. You know that you're conscious, but you can't prove that you're conscious. It's just something that's self-evident to you. If you want to talk about proof, you're talking about logical kind of breakdown of an argument and evidence for it. But you're talking about your subjective experience proving there is God. I would say that's actually the ultimate proof that there is God, but that would just be a declarative statement, similar to consciousness being a self-evident experience.
In my studies of the universe, I value evidence, and I don't see evidence for any kind of active intelligence or power over anything.
If categories dissolve, especially fundamental ones, the culture is dissolving because the culture is a structure of category. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. Right. So, in fact, culture is a structure of category that we all share. So we see things the same way. Well, that's why we can talk. I mean, not exactly the same way, because then we'd have nothing to talk about. But roughly speaking, we have a bedrock of agreement. That's the Bible, by the way.
It's also possible, though, that we're in a simulation.
That we're in a simulation like the Matrix?
Yeah. Well, different from the Matrix, but a simulation of sorts, yeah.
Well, this whole world could be a dream.
It could be a dream, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it could be a simulation. I mean, have you ever played like these, like the advanced video games and how realistic they were getting?
I know. It is like a whole nother life.
Right.
Yeah. With the goggles and everything, 3D and everything.
Yeah.
All of that stuff.
It could be that that's what we know to be Earth. Maybe we're some other creature's avatar. Reveal themselves through the physics. You know, they're creators of this existence. And it's incumbent upon us to try to understand more about this wondrous creation. There may not be a master plan in the sense so there's like maybe an interesting answer to the question of determinism versus free will is that if we are in a simulation, the reason that these higher beings would hold a simulation is to see what happens. They don't know what happens. Otherwise they wouldn't hold the simulation. So when humans create a simulation, so at SpaceX and Tesla, we create simulations all the time. Especially for the rocket, you have to run a lot of simulations to understand what's going to happen, because you can't really test the rocket until it goes to space, and you want it to work. So you have to simulate subsonic, transonic, supersonic, hypersonic ascent, and then coming back, super high heating, and orbital dynamics. All this is going to be simulated because you don't get very many kicks at the can. But we run the simulations to see what happens. Not if we knew what happens, we wouldn't run the simulation. So if there's, so whoever created this existence, they're running it because they don't know what's going to happen, not because they do. I'm less convinced that there's, say, some super consciousness watching over our every movement and kind of evaluating it against some criteria, and deciding whether we're going to go to one place or another when we die. I think that's unlikely. I mean, and it does beg the question: if there is some super consciousness, where did the super consciousness come from? The most likely explanation is that complexity evolved from simplicity. That the simple elements over time combined to become more complex and arrived at what we are.
Our universe had a genesis. Our universe had a Big Bang. There was an explosion, but these explosions take place all the time. Universes keep budding off other universes. And what is the universe expanding into? Expanding into another bigger arena, the arena of 11-dimensional hyperspace. Therefore, our bubble is expanding in nirvana. And so here we have a beautiful melding of Buddhism with the Presbyterian religion.
Now, in many ways, the first book was the Bible. I mean, literally, because at one point there was only one book. Like, as far as our Western culture is concerned, there was one book. And for a while, literally, there was only one book. And that book was the Bible. And then before it was the Bible, it was it was scrolls and it was writings on papyrus. But we were starting to aggregate written text together. And it went through all sorts of technological transformations. And then it became books that everybody could buy, the book everybody could buy. And the first one of those was the Bible. And then it became all sorts of books that everybody could buy. But all those books, in some sense, emerged out of that underlying book. And that book itself, the Bible isn't a book, it's a library. It's a collection of books.
Well, we can say step by step, based on the archaeological evidence, the fossil record, and what we know of physics, how we came to be at this point. But that doesn't explain how the universe came to exist in the first place. Like, how do molecules have consciousness and feelings? The chain of events from a physics standpoint, from the beginning of the universe to now, are quite well understood. But somehow went from a bunch of hydrogen gas to complex molecules, and then an assemblage of complex molecules like ourselves that can feel and talk and think. I mean, just if you leave hydrogen out long enough, it starts talking to itself, basically. That's what happened here. So where along that path from a bunch of hydrogen molecules to humans, where did consciousness start?
Stephen Hawking, in his latest books, he can prove the non-existence of God because there was no time for God to create the universe at the instant of the Big Bang. He says time started with the Big Bang, therefore there was no time for God to create a universe, i.e. there's no God. I think there's a flaw in that argument, because Einstein's theory of gravity breaks down at the instant of the Big Bang. That's why he spent 30 years of his life chasing after a higher theory. And what does string theory say? Well, Einstein says the universe is a bubble. We live on the skin of the bubble, and the bubble's expanding. That's called the Big Bang theory. String theory says there are other bubbles out there. There's a bubble bath of universes, and universes are being formed all the time. Big bangs are happening even as we speak. So we have this bubble bath of universes. Right. So there was something before Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1. There was something before the Big Bang. And we're going to detect gravity waves from the instant of creation with gravity wave detectors in outer space one day. We should find evidence, we should find baby pictures of the instant of the Big Bang, and maybe we'll find evidence of an umbilical cord.
But because those texts influenced more other texts, and then you think about that as a hierarchy, okay, with the Bible at its base, which is certainly the case. Now imagine that's the entire corpus of linguistic production, all things considered. Now how do you understand that? And so it isn't that the Bible is true. It's that the Bible is the precondition for the manifestation of truth.
I believe in a God who holds the heavens and the earth in existence. I believe that on the basis of rational evidence. And as we look at the rise of science in the 16th and 17th centuries, Alfred North Whitehead and many others commented that Men became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not ashamed of being both a scientist and a Christian, because arguably Christianity gave me my subject. What I am amazed at is that serious thinkers today continue to ask us to choose between God and science. That's like asking people to choose between Henry Ford and engineering as an explanation of the motor car.
So good.
When Newton discovered his law of gravity, he didn't say, I've got a law, I don't need God. No, he wrote the Principia Mathematica, arguably the greatest work in the whole history of science. Because he saw that God is not the same kind of explanation as a scientific explanation. God doesn't compete. Agency does not compete with mechanism and law. Why is there something rather than nothing? Alan Sandage, the brilliant cosmologist who became a Christian in his 50s, said God is the answer to that question. But people are now so desperate to show that the universe created itself from nothing, which seems to me to be an immediate oxymoron. If I say X created Y, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of Y. If I say X created X, I'm assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of X, which simply shows that nonsense remains nonsense even if high-powered scientists utter it. It is absurd to complain that it is unthinkable for an unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing, and then to pretend that it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything.
The experience of having the constant flux of changing sense perceptions left me with a sense that there was nothing solid to hold on to in reality, and so this is not a great, this is not the argument for the existence of God that I would repose, in which I would repose great trust. I'm not trying to persuade anyone by this. I'm just telling what my experience was at this point. I later found what I think are very, very persuasive arguments, both philosophically and scientifically. The thing that really convinced me as a university student studying philosophy was an argument known as the argument from epistemological necessity.
Maybe everything's conscious. And we're a pattern of molecules, like the actual atoms in our body change. I mean, some cells stick around for a long time, but most of the cells in your body are regenerated. So, like I think your skin regenerates every 7 years or something. But you're not even the same molecules. Like, from 1 year to the next, the molecules in your body have changed. It's the pattern that stays relatively consistent. The pattern of molecules. So we're a pattern of molecules that can talk and think and feel. Anyway, this is why I think we should expand, we should have more kids and grow and expand consciousness, and and probably have digital consciousness too. I mean, there are some sort of fundamental questions of like, what is thought? What is emotion?
Yeah.
Is it really just one atom bumping into another atom? It feels like something more than that. So I think we're probably missing some really big things. Like some really big things. Well, some people would call it like a soul, in religion,
Yeah,
it'd be a soul. Like you feel like you're you, right? I mean, you don't feel like you're just a collection of atoms. But on what dimension does thought exist? What dimension do emotions exist? We feel them very strongly. I suspect there's more to it than atoms bumping into atoms. What is consciousness? Like when you put the atoms in a particular shape, why are they able to form thoughts and take actions and have feelings? Either perhaps everything's conscious or nothing is conscious. One of the two. But we're composed of atoms, and those atoms are composed of quarks and leptons. And those quarks and leptons have been around since the beginning of the universe. I agree with the principles that Jesus advocated. There's great wisdom in the teachings of Jesus, and I agree with those teachings. And things like turn the other cheek are very important, because as opposed to an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. Forgiveness
is important, and treating people as you would wish to be treated. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Very important. Well, I mean, one way that AI could go wrong is if the extinctionist philosophy is programmed into the AI, whether implicitly or explicitly.
We're going to go in depth into artificial intelligence, which is potentially the biggest civilizational threat. And we are currently circling the event horizon of the black hole that is digital superintelligence, the event horizon.
I mean, probably not explicitly, but there's a strong danger of an implicit extinctionist philosophy being programmed into AI.
Elon Musk contemplates the swift evolution of AI, highlighting its pace compared to traditional annual progress.
The rate at which AI is growing it really boggles the mind.
Yeah.
It currently seems as though the amount of compute dedicated to artificial intelligence is increasing by a factor of 10 roughly every 6 months. It's faster than annual, that's for sure. So I recently heard today about a gigawatt class AI compute cluster.
The paradox arises as AI suppresses hateful content, simultaneously raising concerns about the erosion of free speech.
And this is despite, showing repeated analyses of the system, including third-party analysis of the system, which actually showed that the number of views of hateful content declined. So, the third parties who have all the data analyzed and said, actually, there's less hate speech.
Digital superintelligence, akin to a black hole, emerges as an unpredictable force, labeled as the singularity by Musk.
We'll have the sort of AGI singularity. Sometimes digital superintelligence is called like a singularity, like a black hole, because just like with a black hole, it's difficult to predict what happens after you pass the event horizon of a black hole.
It's really staggering, and for sure. So I'm just trying to give a sense of scale. I've never seen anything move this fast. Any technology. This is the fastest moving thing. In terms of aiming for AI safety, my best guess of my sort of primitive biological neural net is that we should aim for maximum truth seeking and curiosity. That's my gut feel for how to make AI as safe as possible.
Musk's apprehensions intensify as AI development accelerates at an unprecedented rate, emphasizing the urgency of safety measures.
The issue, I think, with the ADL is not a question of hate speech. It's not a question of anti-Semitism, obviously. It's that the ADL and a lot of other organizations have become activist organizations which are acting far beyond their stated mandate or their original mandate. And I think far beyond what donors to those organizations think they are doing.
Activism intertwines with AI discussions, with organizations like the ADL taking on roles that extend beyond their original mandates.
Neuralink is necessarily moves slower than AI because whenever you put a device in a human, you have to be incredibly careful. So I think it's not clear to me that the Neuralink will be ready before AGI. I think AGI is probably going to happen first.
Neuralink's progress, while notable, trails behind the rapid advancement of artificial general intelligence, posing challenges.
So this is a staggering amount of compute. And there are many such things. That's just the biggest one I've heard of so far. But there's a 500 megawatt installation happening. There's multiple 100 megawatt installations in the works. It's not even clear to me what you do with that much compute. Because when you actually add up all human data ever created, you really just run out of things to train on quite quickly. If you've got maybe 20 or 30,000 H100s, you can train on
synthetic data.
Almost everything.
Yeah.
You have to have synthetic data because for certainly well under 100,000 H100s, you can train on all human data ever created, including video.
A colossal 500 megawatt installation unfolds as a mammoth storage facility, harboring vast reserves of synthetic data.
So I've actually met with a number of world leaders and to talk about AI risk, because I think for a lot of people, unless you're really immersed in the technology, you don't know just how significant the risk can be. And I think the reward is also very positive. So I don't want to be, I tend to view
the future as a series of probabilities. There's a certain probability that something will go wrong, some probability it'll go right. It's kind of a spectrum of things. And to the degree that there is free will versus determinism, then we want to try to exercise that free will to ensure a great future. So, and the single biggest rebuttal that I've gotten among leaders in the West with regard to AI is that, well, sure, the West might regulate AI, but what about China? Because to your point about which countries will have significant leadership in AI, China is certainly one of them. One of the very top, potentially number one.
Elon Musk takes on a role of a harbinger, cautioning global leaders about the perilous trajectory of unchecked AI development.
So you've got your limbic system, your sort of basic drives, your cortex, which is the thinking and planning, and then you have a tertiary layer, which is your computers, your devices, your phones, laptops, all the servers that exist, the applications. And in fact, I think probably a lot of people have found that if you leave your cell phone behind,
take it away. Yeah.
If you
Get
if you forget your cell phone, it's like missing limb syndrome. You've like where'd that thing go? Losing your cell phone is like missing limb syndrome. So because your cell phone is an extension of yourself. The limitation is bandwidth. So the rate at which you can input, or I should say output information into your phone or computer is very slow. So with a phone, it's really just the speed of your thumb movements. And with, best case scenario, you're a speed typist on a keyboard. But even that data rate is very slow. We're talking about tens, maybe hundreds of bits per second, whereas a computer can communicate in trillions of bits per second. So and this is admittedly somewhat of a, Hail Mary shot or whatever, is that if you can improve the bandwidth between your cortex and your digital tertiary self, then you can achieve better cohesion between what humans want and what AI does. At least that's one theory. I'm not saying this is a sure thing. It's just one potential iron in the fire. If ultimately, hundreds of millions or billions of people get a high bandwidth interface to their digital tertiary self, their AI self effectively, then that seems like that probably leads to a better future for humanity.
Musk envisions a future where AI optimizes mundane tasks, envisioning a symbiotic relationship that uplifts humanity.
The danger with programming morality and with an explicit morality program is what is sometimes referred to as the Waluigi problem. If you create Luigi, you automatically create Waluigi by inverting Luigi.
Sure.
So I think we have to be careful about programming in an arbitrary morality. But if we focus on maximizing truth with acknowledged error, that's probably, I think that's the way to maximize safety and also to have the AI be curious. Because I think that, Earth is much more interesting to an advanced AI with humans on it than without humans.
The Waluigi problem looms, urging a delicate balance in programming morality to guide AI without compromising human values.
We're at a very interesting juncture in the world from a technology standpoint. If you say there's so many things happening, if you were to plot the various types of technology on a chart, the modern era, and I'd say even just like really the last 20 years, certainly the last 100 years from the dawn of human civilization, the growth of technology just looks like a wall. Technology is improving at sort of a hyper exponential rate. And we obviously want to make sure that the technology is something that benefits humanity and to the greatest extent possible. And
what would that look like? What would that look like?
Well, like there's this guy on the front page of the New York Times, I think about a year ago. He's head of the Extinctionist Society, and he was literally quoted as, "There are 8 billion people on Earth. It would be better if there were none."
Oh my God.
And yeah. So, and if you take the extreme environmentalist argument, especially the implicit extreme environmentalist argument, there's an implicit conclusion that humans are a plague on the surface of the Earth. So I think we have to be quite careful about an implicit, like if the extinctionist movement was somehow programmed into AI as the optimization, that would be obviously extremely dangerous. So I'm trying not to be sort of a scaremonger or something, but when you're talking about having something that is an intelligence far in excess of the smartest human on Earth, you have to say, at that point, who's in charge? Is it the computers or the humans? And
there's some interesting ratios that I think are quite profound, like one of them being the ratio of digital to biological compute. So if you take also all the human brains and then all the computer circuits and you say, what's that ratio? The ratio of digital to biological compute is increasing dramatically every year because the population of Earth is fairly static, but the output of silicon is dramatically increased. So basically at a certain point, with the percentage of compute that will be biological is very small. And anyway, some of these technologies, and I'm a technologist, and I bear some responsibility for the creation of artificial intelligence, at least, a little bit. And I think we just want to make sure that we're guiding things to a technological, a positive future and reduce the probability of a negative one.
We definitely live in the most interesting times. And I actually, for a while, I was kind of depressed about AI, but then I kind of got fatalistic about it and said, well, even if AI was going to, end all humanity, would I prefer to be around to see it or not? I guess I would prefer to be around to see it, just out of curiosity. But obviously, hopefully, AI is extremely beneficial to humanity. But the thing that sort of reconciled me to be less anxious about it was to say, well, I guess even if it was apocalyptic, I'd still be curious to see I'll be curious to see it.
I mean, it's sort of a funny thing. Like if you assume like a best case AI scenario, imagine if you're the AI and you're trying to, you just want the human to tell you what it wants. Just please spit it out. But it's speaking so slowly like a tree. Okay. Like trees communicate. Okay. If you watch a tree, like sped up a version of a tree growing, it's actually communicating. It's communicating with the soil. It's trying to find the sunlight. It's reacting to other trees and that kind of thing very slowly. But from a tree standpoint, it's, not that slow. So what I'm saying is we don't want to be a tree. That's the idea behind a high bandwidth neural interface is to even when the AI desperately wants to do good things for us, so that we can actually communicate several orders of magnitude faster than we currently can.
Digital superintelligence might be the most significant technology that humanity ever creates. And it has the potential to be more dangerous than nuclear weapons. So, in the case of creating OpenAI, it was to have there not be a unipolar world where Google, with its subsidiary DeepMind, would control an overwhelming amount of AI talent and compute and resources, which then is somewhat dependent on basically how Larry Page and Sergey Brin and Eric Schmidt believe things should go, because they between the three of them, or two out of three, have control over Alphabet because they've got super voting rights. And I was quite concerned based on some conversations I had with Larry Page, where he did call me a speciesist for being pro-humanity. And so I'm like, what side are you on, Larry?
I think generally it would be a good idea to have some kind of AI regulatory agency. And you start off with a team that gathers insight to get a maximum understanding. Then you have some proposed rulemaking, and then eventually you have regulations that are put in place. And this is something we have for everything that is a potential danger to the public. So if it is, if we're in the Food Administration, we've got aircraft with the FAA and rockets. There's anything that is a danger to the public over time. We have learned, often the hard way, after many people have, to have a regulatory agency to protect public safety. I'm not someone who thinks that regulation is some panacea where it's only good. Of course, there are some downsides to regulation in that things move a bit slower, and sometimes you get regulatory capture and that kind of thing. But on balance, I think the public would not want to get rid of most regulatory agencies. And you can think of it also as like the regulatory agency being like a referee. What sports game doesn't have a referee? You need someone to make sure that that people are playing fairly, not breaking the rules, and that's why basically every sport has a referee of one kind or another. So
That's the rationale for AI safety. And I've been pushing this all around the world. And when I was in China a few months ago, meeting with some of the senior leadership, my primary topic was AI safety and regulation. And they, after we had a long discussion, agreed that there's merit to AI regulation and immediately took action in this regard. So sometimes we'll get this comment of like, well, if the West does AI regulation, surely then what if China doesn't and then leaps ahead? And I think they're also taking it very seriously because, the opposite of whatever moral constraints you program into the system.